Okay, so to the extent that any newspaper presidential endorsement matters, I guess if one was going to, it would be the New York Times, and they seem to get that. So they dragged this process out day after day, building up the hype, releasing teaser trailers, and that meant that everyone had a bunch of days to try to predict who would they support. Would it be a fairly obvious one, like a Biden or a Warren? Would they really throw a curveball, do like a Bloomberg or a Sanders? And in the end, they did something that almost no one could have predicted, a dual endorsement of Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren. But it turns out that somebody did predict it. Take a look at this tweet from earlier in the day where it was revealed. Jordan Hewlett tweeted, tired, New York Times endorses Biden. Wired, New York Times endorses Pete. Inspired, New York Times endorses Warren and Klobuchar at the same time. Turned out he was onto something, and now he's also on our show. How's it going, Jordan?
John, it's going great. Thank you for having me.
Was that just a total joke, or did you actually think there was any chance of that double endorsement?
I'm going to leave that part up to the viewer's imagination, but I can't actually believe that happened.
So let's briefly say they said their basic argument was, right now there is a fight between the pragmatists and the idealists or whatever, which I think is not a fair description of what's actually going on. But if that's what they believe, then they want to pick one from each of those camps. So that's what they did. What do you think about that strategy?
It's just the ultimate both sides approach for the New York Times. It's just like, here's two candidates with wildly different platforms. We endorse both of them. They're just refusing to make a choice. And I saw some questions, fair questions, I think, being raised on Twitter where people were saying, if you can't pick one, why are you even making this endorsement yet? And the suggestion was that they were forced into this on this rigid timeline because of that TV production schedule for that show on FX. It just seemed, if that's the case, it just seems a little like journalistic malpractice, and maybe just you didn't really need to do that. But mostly my takeaway was this was a both sides move, a false equivalence, and just they should have just waited until they had one concrete person that they stood behind. This was kind of a weak move.
Yeah, if it was because of a production schedule, that's just about the worst explanation I can think of. If you want us to believe that you take any responsibility for what you are obviously pitching as this big important choice to the amount that you hyped it, for it to be held captive to a release schedule like that is ridiculous. And look, I was playing devil's advocate, but I at least said what their argument is, that you have these dueling camps. When is that not true? When is a primary field all people who agree fundamentally on everything about the future of the party? That's always going to be the case. And so even inside of their justification, this is a massive dereliction of duty. Now, at the end of the day, how much does it really matter? Do you think that Klobuchar or Warren are going to get a big boost out of this?
No, I think these endorsements matter very little. The people that would sincerely read the New York Times endorsement and allow it to inform their voting preference, you could probably count on one hand. I imagine they all live on the Upper West Side and go to the same cocktail parties. People who treat politics purely as sport, like some horse race, rather than for many people a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
It's just the New York Times endorsement generally does not predict the winner. They haven't really seen a bump in Klobuchar's polling whatsoever. She's going to get knocked out probably after New Hampshire or Nevada. It doesn't really have much of an impact. And Warren is also on a slope downward. After last week, she just didn't really have the strongest week. So I don't think this will make a huge impact. It's more of just a spectacle. But one thing I do want to point out, that you said earlier, they frame this as a war between two competing camps. You could say that about the general election as well.
Yeah.
So are we going to see both endorse the Republican and the Democratic nominee at the same time?
Yeah, it's they're the over enthusiastic mom in the stands yelling, "You're all winners!" No,
we just hope they all
can't all be.
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. Anyway, I just want to briefly acknowledge one thing because you mentioned last week. So I did see. I don't know if you saw the video, if it was at some event, but Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren sort of walking arm in arm, commiserating and laughing. It's just funny after how vicious and vitriolic Like the conversation about that whole thing was, they're just like apparently back to friends or whatever, or at least that's what they want to project.
Yes, I think, again, largely this was just a product of CNN trying to manufacture a scandal because they had the debate. I don't think that reflected any sort of deep divide between the two. I'm happy we got that moment because it shows that the progressive alliance is there. And as we saw, The Intercept reported also last week that Bernie's camp had previously been looking into whether Warren could serve as VP and Treasury Secretary.
Yeah.
So I don't think this bridge is really burned, maybe bruised some egos, but largely overall, I think they're okay, and I was relieved to see that as well.
Yeah, I was too. And then we can turn back to the primary because we only have a couple of weeks until the first big races. Thank you for watching this clip from the Damage Report. For more content from the show and access to TYT Network members-only exclusives, go to tyt.com/Brooke. Wait, no, it's tyt.com/John. Go to tyt.com/John to sign up.